Something missing from my bed. I'm staring at the ceiling, can't remember what I said. Let me whisper in your ear. I'm sitting here alone, but I wish that you were here. I'm feeling like I messed up and I'm sorry. I look up and my vision's getting starry. Wrapped up in my head, think back all the time about the things I never said. Think back all the time about the things I never said.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday evening, not evening, Thursday morning, afternoon. It's the afternoon. Happy Thursday afternoon live tutorial stream. Yes, it is lunchtime, at least here in Dallas on Thursday, and I am here to teach you a fun project. I hope everyone's having a good Thursday. It is a beautiful day here in Dallas, which is crazy because it's supposed to snow tomorrow. Like, wackadoo weather. Absolutely, like, literally the strangest winter I think I've ever experienced in Dallas. Now, granted, I've only lived here for 15 years, not my entire life, but, right, if it's evening. Oh, no, not quite. I just need more caffeine to remember that it's not evening quite yet. But yeah, it is supposed to snow tomorrow in Dallas. Chances are we will probably still be here in the store because here in Dallas proper, it's only supposed to snow for about an hour in the middle of the afternoon and then get right back up above freezing. So I don't think we should have any weather issues, but there is a small chance that we'll be streaming from Beading Dreams remote tomorrow, which does mean the chances of feline participation are high, but I will keep everyone apprised of all that situation on social media. So of course, if you don't follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, that's a really good way, especially with the wackadoo weather that we've been having here in Texas, to get information on whether or not we'll be open, when we'll be open, and you know, if there are any adjustments to our streaming schedule as well. But we are here Thursday lunchtime to do this project. This is our infinity earrings. So this is a fun, once again, like I said last night, there's a whole lot of earrings that you can do with just kind of variations on the theme of, you know, take a piece of wire, make a component, hang things off of it, and then attach it to an ear wire by some mechanism. In this case, we've got chain and a little wire wrapped bead. So lots of fun things you can do with variations on that, and what we have for you today, of course, is one of them. So let's talk about tools and supplies for this afternoon's tutorial. We are going to need some wire. I've got 16 gauge wire here. The sample was actually made with 14 gauge wire, and that is because I was making the sample at home during a snow day, and 14 gauge was all I had. It's really up to you what gauge of wire you want to use for this component. 14 is going to give you a bit of a chunkier look, 16 is going to be a little bit more dainty. I'm also going to need top drilled teardrop beads. I'm going to need 6 of them, and I'm going to be using these pretty citrine beads today. You're going to need 2 center drilled beads. It's just going to be to attach the top of the chain to the ear wire, and I got 2 pearls that I'm going to use for that. And then you are going to need a decent quantity of 26 gauge wire, and that's going to be to attach all of your beads onto the component after you have made it. And we are going to be doing top drilled wire wraps with the little hats, and then we're going to need a little bit for that pearl as well. You are also going to need, of course, a pair of ear wires, because it's really hard to have a functional pair of earrings without ear wires. As far as tools go, you're going to need just your 3 basic wire working ones for today's tutorial. You're going to need a round nose pliers, chain nose pliers, and a wire cutter. And that's it. You don't need any special tools or mandrels, or you don't need a hammer, bench block, or anything for this particular tutorial. Okay, so let's start by cutting our 16 or 14 gauge wire. Again, on my sample I used 14, but I'm using 16 for today. And this is the thing about doing a component like this, especially since it's got this overlapping bit in the middle. Since it actually overlaps itself right there, you're gonna need more wire than you think you're gonna need for something like this. So I mean, it's basically, if we're gonna say, you know, it's 1 inch for each of those, plus 1.5 inches for the center, so that's 3.5 inches plus for loops. So we're gonna cut 2 4-inch pieces of wire, and that may sound like, once again, like more than you want, but I promise it's going to work up a lot more quickly than you think. So cutting myself 2 4-inch pieces of wire, and again, this is my thicker wire, so this is my 16 or 14, whichever you've chosen to be the thicker wire for today's project. So, interesting story about this component. So this actually started out as me trying to make something very different. This started out as me trying to make, you know, just kind of a general wavy component, and then I accidentally squeezed two of my loops together on top of each other, and I got this cool looking thing with this sort of figure 8 in the center, and I was like, hey, that's pretty neat. Let's do that instead of what I was originally trying to do. But so what this essentially is it is a curve in the center, and then two curves on the outside, and then two more curves down going up, and then we're going to pinch it together. So that means we are going to start by finding the center of our wire. It's not a bad idea to straighten your wire out. And okay, so the center of my wire is about there. I could mark that with a marker if I wanted to. I'm just going to mark that with my fingers, and I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and I'm going to grab right at the center of my wire, and I'm going to grab at the fattest part of my pliers. And I can tell that not do a good job of eyeballing that. There we go. And then I'm just going to bend my wire up around my pliers. And if I did this well, which I didn't, there we go. I want my two ends of my wire to be even. Now of course I got my shape a little bit wonky down here while I was making that adjustment, so we're going to take a minute and fix that. Okay, so what we should have is a U shape in the bottom of our wire. Now I am going to measure this next part, and I'm going to go ahead and mark it because I'm making a pair of earrings. So that means I'm making two components, and ideally, there's a marker in here, just won't come out. I'm making a pair of earrings, so ideally I want them to be similar. I mean, in a perfect world, identical is what we're going for, but of course it's not a perfect world, so similar is I think the achievable goal that we can hope for. So I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm just going to measure and mark up a ½ inch on my wire. And of course, once you've marked on your wire with your ruler, you can always take that off using, if you're just using a regular Sharpie branded marker, you can take that off using rubbing alcohol. It comes off pretty easily. So marking on your wire with a Sharpie is never something you have to worry about hiding at the end of your project. Like, it's going to be really easy to take it off. And while I've got my ruler out, I might as well just go ahead and measure and mark the center of my, hi Smee, hi Tallyfet. Welcome in everybody. How's everybody's Thursday going? Also, I don't know if I've had enough caffeine to go to infinity, Tallyfet. You might have to wait until I've at least finished my first Diet Coke of the day. I'm just saying. It's been a bit of a slow start today. Also, I started the day with an interaction with my mother, which is never a good way to start the day. It's just not. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead, since I measured and marked the center of my second piece of wire, I'm going to hold that and bend it. And then I can measure up and mark that ½ inch spot. Ooh, Smee's about to visit the San Antonio Museum of Art. That sounds like fun. Okay, so now I've got two bent pieces of wire that, again, I've marked a ½ inch above the bend. So now I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and I'm just going to grab on that marking. Okay, so in this instance, I'm going to grab on my marking. I can grab a little bit underneath it if I want to cheat and make this a little bit shorter, but what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to bend that down, and yeah, I do actually think I want to make that a little shorter. So, oh, dang like everyone started their day off crappy today. That's no good. I don't get people though who lie about their work. Like it's like their people aren't gonna find out. Like, really? Okay, so alright, so there we go. So this is the goal. I have achieved the goal, which is I've got my 2 bends and they are, you know, essentially equal. So notice they're not exactly on my marks, but my marks are in the same place on both of them, which means that I have accomplished my task of bending them in the same place. I can repeat that on my other wire, like so. Okay, so at this point you should have kind of this weird sort of M shape going on, and then we're going to do one more bend, and I can mark that one or not, but I just want to do it basically even with this bottom bend or a little bit above. Right? You know? Oh, that just absolutely sucks. I'm so sorry, Talifa. That's a crappy way to start a Thursday, but we're so glad that you are hanging out here with us. Hopefully we are a less crappy way to continue your Thursday. Okay, so I'm eyeballing it. So I'm just gonna grab about even with the bottom loop there and bring that up, and then repeat the same thing on the other side. So now you're gonna have a really wonky shape, and this is what we're gonna pinch in just a minute to make our infinity shape. Okay, so now that I've got my 2 kind of crazy M shapes going here, I'm just going to take one of them and I'm just going to pinch this point and this point together so that these 2 loops overlap, and that's how you make your figure 8 shape. So it's going to be this curve, and ideally we want that to be on top of each other. So I'm just going to move that over a bit with my pliers. And at this point, your other loops are going to splay out and start to look kind of weird. Don't worry about that. That's very easy to fix. I'm going to repeat that on our second piece. So again, just push it together until those 2 overlap. And so now I have my cool figure 8 in the center. Now I'm going to take my 2 loops that have kind of splayed out and gotten weird, and I'm going to bring them back in so that they're sitting nice and close to the bottom of that figure 8. And ideally you want these all to be even, or you want the figure 8 to be slightly longer. You can see that this side is a little bit wonky shaped, so we're going to try and de-wonkify that a bit. There we go, so that it looks a little bit more like a regular curve. At this point, I'm going to even out my tops. And then here and here, I'm going to take our round nose pliers, not our chain nose. And we're just going to roll that down, and those are going to be the loops that attach to my chain. So you can get a lot of variation in this design just kind of based on how you position everything. Like, you can keep everything positioned really close together like I have, and that's an aesthetic that I personally really like, but you also could pull these out farther and have more of a wide component for your earrings. So it's really up to you. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot you can do to get some variation in this particular earring. Alright, so now we're back to our second one. So we're going to take these side loops that have kind of gotten splayed out, and we're just going to push them in which you can do with your fingers or your pliers. But I personally like all three of these to be touching now. There's a slight problem, and that the positioning here, you can see, is not exactly the same. This one, the center loop's a little bit lower, and this one, they're all equal. So the only solution to that really is to pull the side loops up a bit. And to do that, you're just going to put your pliers in there, and you're just going to rotate them up just a bit. So see, now I've got my side loop slightly above my center loop, and that is going to be a better match to my other component. I think I need to actually do that just a hair more. There we go. And if this gets a little weird here on the side, you can just use your chain nose pliers and just squeeze it to straighten it out. Like so. Then I'm going to repeat that process on my other side. That's better. Okay, so that one looks much more now like its friend over here. And then even out the tops, like this is not a good situation going on here. So I'm going to trim off this extra wire. And then we're going to roll down to make our attachment loops. And again, we just want to give a double check, make sure they look fairly similar, which they do. So now we can continue on with adding our beads. So I'm going to find 6 citrines in my little dish that I want to use for my earrings. That's going to take me a minute. So pairing up stones for earrings is always an interesting proposition, because even if you get a strand that looks completely uniform, it's almost guaranteed that it's not. There are minute variations in size, shape, and color that you really don't notice until you're trying to make a pair out of some things. That being said, it's important, I think, to remember when you are making something like a pair of earrings that the earrings are going to be on opposite sides of your head. Actually, the main problem I find when I'm pairing up earrings is not people being put off by inconsistency when they're being worn, but it's actually in like the presentation of them. Because when you have them in your ears, which, speaking of, I forgot to put on earrings this morning, so I'm gonna need to fix that when I get off stream. But when they're in your ears, they're on opposite sides of your head. It's almost impossible to tell any difference. When you're presenting them to the client, typically they're in a box right next to each other, and that's when the inconsistencies in the gemstone pairings really get noticed. But what I find works best for me is trying to go with consistency of size and color over consistency of shape, and that's really a personal decision. Also, when you're doing an earring like this that's got, 3 stones, generally all 3 stones don't necessarily have to match each other, but you want this stone to have a matching pair on the other earring, and then ideally you want 4 stones that match to make this position. Once again, that's not always possible, and that's just kind of something that you need to figure out, in your own artistic way. When you're doing this, another way around that, of course, is to, goodness.
Yeah.
Is that a client or a delivery person? Wow. A very determined client. It's not Noel Petty, is it?
No.
Okay. So another way to deal with that is to use a different stone for the middle. So if you can't find, a pair and a 4 of the same stone, go into your stash, see what you have a pair of, and then what you have a 4 of, and see what goes together. So now that I've got my stones all good to go, I'm going to go ahead and cut myself some of my 26 gauge wire. I'm going to need actually a fair amount. I'm going to need probably about a foot or slightly less per stone because I am making the hats. I'm not going to start with a 6 foot long piece of 26 gauge wire though, because that's just way too long and unwieldy. So I'm going to start with about a 2 foot piece long, and that should be enough to do about 2 wire wraps, and then I'll cut myself more as we proceed. So this is top row wire wrapping with the little wrapped cone on the top, what we typically call a hat. And this is a really good technique. The hat technique, first of all, is really attractive, so and kind of gives your wire wraps a little bit more oomph to them. Now that being said, it takes a little bit more time and it takes a little bit more wire, so it's something, especially if you're selling your jewelry, that you need to keep in mind when you're doing your cost analysis is you know, is it really cost effective for me to use 12 inches of wire per wire wrap, especially if you're using something like gold filled, which, holy guacamole, the price just like went through the roof on. It's nuts. So that's definitely something to bear in mind. You can also use, you know, the hat wraps selectively. You could do it on the center stone and not on the side stones, and that's a way to kind of maximize the impact and minimize the cost on that. But either way, this is still just your basic chain of tiers wire wrapping with a little bit of extra flourish at the end. So to that effect, we're going to start with our 26 gauge wire, and I'm just going to start with the middle stone of one of my earrings, and I'm going to put the wire through my stone so that I've got a long side and a short side. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say. I knew that rant had a purpose. I just forgot what it was. The hat wrap is also really good if you have beads that are drilled poorly, meaning they are not drilled in the center, or they are, you know, drilled crooked. The hat wrap is a really good way to camouflage that. So obviously for hand picking your beads individually, ideally you won't get any that are drilled wonkily because you'll be able to weed those out. But if you're getting, say, teardrops by the strand, you're almost guaranteed to have a drop or 2 or 5 or 20 on that strand that are not drilled well. And it's really nice to have in your back pocket a way to still use those stones, get your money's worth out of them, and present them in a fashion that looks attractive. Okay, so I've got my wire through my stone, and I've got a short side and a long side. Short side is about 1.5 inches to 2 inches, and the long side is the entire rest of my wire. I'm going to go ahead and bend my wire up against the holes of my bead, and I want to make a triangle, and ideally I want the point of that triangle to be directly above the point of my bead, which it almost is. There we go. Now I'm going to take my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to grab the long wire, and I want to grab right above the point where those two wires cross, and then I'm just going to take my pliers and bend so that now what I've done is I've taken my long wire and I've centered it up over the central axis of the bead. Then I'm just going to wrap the short wire around the long wire, and I don't want to do this too many times because I'm going to be doing another wrap coming down from the top, and so I don't want it to be too much wire. So I'm just going to go around 1.5 times like so, and then I'm going to trim that wire off and tuck it in. And I am going to go ahead and say, it being 12:46, that I'm going to go ahead and finish one earring for you here on stream, considering that we have some apparently very agitated customers waiting for us to open. So shockingly or not shockingly, the second earring is going to go together exactly the same as the first. So now what I've created is bead on a stick. Essentially I've created a head pin with my teardrop at the end of it. Now I'm going to make a basic wire wrap loop on the top, and that's what I'm going to use to attach to my earrings. So I'm going to take my pliers and I'm going to place them so that they're touching the top of that wrap that I just did. Now we're going to do that basic wire wrap loop, which if you were on last night's tutorial, we did a whole lot of. So that means we're going to go away, and rotate our pliers up, pull my wire back up over the top towards me and down, so I'm starting to form a loop around my pliers. I can't finish that loop though because this jaw of my pliers is in the way, so I'm just going to rotate my pliers out of the way, cross my wire underneath so that I make a right angle right here between these two wires, and that gives me my lady with a scarf, which is our term for the loop when it's been finished but not closed. Now I'm going to take this loop and I'm going to grab one of my earring components, and it's going to be easier if you so there's no wrong way to use this component, but I think it is a little bit easier to use it this direction where you're threading onto a single wire as opposed to a double wire, but there's no reason you couldn't flip this upside down and attach your chains here and here and hang beads from here, here, and here. So it's really just about, once again, aesthetically what looks best to you. But I'm going to use this loop here. I'm just going to take my wire, thread that through, and rotate around so that my loop is completely around that earring component. Then I'm going to grab my chain nose and I'm going to hold across my loop. This gets a little tricky. Usually you're going to have to hold that component in there as well, which is fine. Just hold firmly but gently so that everything stays stable, but you're not pressing your wire, your 26 gauge too hard into your 16 gauge, because that can cause your wire to break. I'm going to start at the base of that loop and I'm going to wrap downwards. Once I get to the wraps that I've already made, I'm just going to start wrapping over them. And then once I get down to my bead, I'm going to start wrapping over my bead. And at some point, it's going to become difficult to hold it in this position. Like, notice how every time I'm pulling my wire now, I'm sort of torquing my bead out of line, which I don't want to do. So at some point, it's going to become easier for you to switch hands and hold the bead and then continue wrapping, because now I've got a really firm grip on the bead and I'm not torquing that loop out of alignment. Make sure you're setting each wrap beneath the wrap before it. Alright, and when you decide that you're done, we're going to go ahead and there's a couple different ways we can finish this. My preferred method for finishing is actually to just pull that wire up to the top and wrap it around. I think that gives you a nice clean finish that's very secure, but I've done that on a lot of tutorials in the past, so today I'm going to show you another way to finish. So the other way to finish, which is a little bit more difficult but can be a little bit cleaner line for anybody that doesn't like that extra line going up the back, is to take your wire and cut it off on what you have determined is the back, and cut it off about even with the side of your stone. Now, find something stabby in your work area. And by something stabby, I mean an awl or a centering punch, just something that's going to allow you, solder pig, something that's going to allow you to make a little cave, essentially. Make a little pathway in your wire where you can then, probably, well, okay, that was definitely not what I was expecting to pull out of my toolbox. It was only half of my scribe. The other half of my scribe apparently is like just in there. Okay, I found it all. So something stabby. You want to be careful not to stab yourself. But on the back, whatever you've determined is the back of your stone, what you're going to do is you're going to take your pointy object and you're just going to, while holding your wraps, you're just going to poke that up the back of your wraps so that you've made just a little raised spot. Then you can take that end of your wire, grab your chain nose, and just bend it up and just push it right up into that little spot that you made for it. So the dangers with this, and the reason that it's a little more difficult, is first of all, if you're not careful, you're going to get some some squishing and some warping of your wire wrap. Number 2, you need to be careful not to stab yourself with your awl, and number 3, if you cut this piece too long, it's not going to go all the way up there and sit nicely. But there's bead number 1. Okay, now I just need to do 2 more. So I'm still working off my same piece of my 26 gauge wire. So again, I'm going to go through my bead. I need a long side and a short side. Like so. Bend your wires up in a triangle. You want that triangle to bend right up against the holes in the bead, and you want the point of that triangle to be directly above the point of your bead. You're going to take your chain nose pliers, grab right above the point where those 2 wires cross, bend that up so that now your wire is centered over the central axis of your bead. Then we're going to wrap the short wire around the long wire, not too many times, just 1.5 to 2 times. And at this point, I usually just use my fingers to wrap because your chances of getting your pliers in there are pretty slim. You can try tipping the stone forward and getting your pliers in there, but in my experience, that just usually winds up with me breaking the stone, which is not exactly the goal of the procedure. Okay, so now I have my citrine bead on a stick. Now I'm going to make a basic wire wrap loop on top of the wrap that I've already made, and that goes away, rotate, back up over the top, rotate underneath, like so. That's our lady with the scarf. Now we're going to go to one of my 2 side areas on my component, just thread that wire in there, and make sure you pop it around so that loop is completely around your component, and then hold across your loop and just start wrapping down. Once you reach the wraps that are already there, just wrap over them. Once you reach your stone, start wrapping over your stone. Once your stone starts getting too wobbly to hold, switch hands, hold the stone, and continue wrapping down. And I'm going to continue wrapping until I've covered over the holes in my stone with that wire. Alright, now at this point I have defined what is the back of my piece, which is where that tuck is. So that means that this is going to be the back of this stone. So I'm going to wrap this around one last time, trim it even with the edge of my stone. Use my awl to just, and so all I'm doing is just inserting my awl in there and using it to just lift my wires up just a tad so that I can take my wire end and I can just fold it up and just press it in there. Alright, so that's 2. 1 more to go. Alright, so wire goes through the bead. So this is a thing with gemstone teardrops, is 26 gauge wire is usually the size of wire you need to use. It's never a bad idea to have 28 gauge just hanging out, just in case. I actually had to switch out one of my beads at the beginning of the tutorial because it didn't fit. In general, yes, that was a good question. So the question was asked, in general, is it normal practice to make the hat long enough to cover over the holes in the stone? And the answer is yes. Usually that is going to be your metric for measurement, is you want to wrap until you've covered the holes in your stone. And this is another reason that this is a good technique for stones that are drilled poorly, because you're completely covering the entire drill and you're making essentially a cone to brace your stone. So if you've got a stone that's back drilled, or if you've got a stone that's drilled crooked, you can make it appear as if it's drilled like a normal stone, because you're hiding all of that. So I've done my 1.5 wraps around. I'm going to trim, and I'm going to tuck in my end there. And now we're on to basic wire wrap loop, which starts with our round nose. And I'm making my loops a little bit bigger because of the size of the 16 gauge wire that they need to go around. I want to make sure that they've got enough room to dangle. So I'm not going right here at the very tip of my pliers. I'm going down a little bit just to make a slightly larger loop. You go away, rotate, back up over the top, rotate underneath. That's Our Lady with the scarf. I've got my final open spot on my component. And I'm just going to thread that on there. Like so, hold across, and do my wrap and my hat. So once again, the goal here is to hold across the loop, but there's a pretty good chance you're going to have to hold your component as well, just because there's not as much room in there as you would need to just hold that loop individually. So we're going to wrap down, and then once we reach the wrap that's already there, we're just going to start wrapping over it. Now notice I'm still pulling fairly hard on my wire, so I'm still trying my best to create tight, crisp wraps. One of the terms for this technique is an organic or a messy wire wrap, but I personally still like to make them as neat as possible. So we're just going to keep going until we've covered over the holes in that bead. And then once again, I'm going to figure out what is the back, which is this side. So that means one more wrap, trim, make a hole with your awl, but don't stab yourself, and then tuck your wire in. So when I'm tucking it in, I'm just taking it, and I am just giving it a 90-degree bend and essentially putting it in that little channel that I made, like so, and then just kind of shoving it up there. Alright, so we're this close to having an earring. I've got 3 drops with hats on there. I'm going to go ahead and grab my chain. I did not include chain in the list of supplies, but we do, unlike the wire wrap chain that we made last night, we are going to use just a footage chain to finish out our earrings today. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces of that chain that are 1 inch long. That means to make a pair of these earrings in total, you're going to need about 4.5 inches. And that extra 1/2 inch is just because you will lose a link when you're cutting. So I've got 2 1-inch pieces of my chain. And then I'm going to just take my loops on the side, and I'm going to open one of them. Okay, and here's another. Okay, there. You just need to make sure that you're using the loop of the chain that's big enough to go onto your wire. So I'm going to attach that there. And then I'm going to open. Oh dear. You know it's not a good stream if I don't bash my camera. I'm going to open that one. So I'm going to attach that piece of chain onto my other side. Make sure I close both of these securely. Make sure that they're the same length, which they are. So now I'm just going to attach the top here with the basic wire wrap loop. So that means I'm going to go back to my 26 gauge wire. I'm going to sorry, I'm gonna find one of those pearls, and we're gonna do a double-ended basic wire wrapped link. So that means I'm gonna take my round nose pliers, and I'm gonna start about 1 inch to 1.5 inches from the end of my wire. I'm gonna push my wire away from me, rotate your pliers, back up over the top, rotate them again, and underneath, that's our lady with the scarf. That lady with the scarf is going to get linked onto these 2 pieces of chain, which are right here at the top of my earring. So I'm just going to catch those 2 end links of chain on my scarf wire. Like so, and just slide those all the way up into my loop, and then hold across my loop and wrap. Like so. Like so. Trim off your end. And press it down, and then put your pearl on, or whatever bead you're using. It just needs to be something that's center drilled, and you probably don't want it to be too big because you don't want it to pull focus. And then we're going to do a second basic wire wrap loop. So that's going to be away, rotate, back up over the top, rotate underneath, and this is going to be where my ear wire will go, so I don't need to attach it to anything because my ear wire will open. So I'm going to hold across that loop, and then I'm going to wrap. And we're going to trim. And then we're going to press that in. So that now we've created a nice central point where we can then attach our ear wire. So we're going to go open and drop that on and close, and there we go. So there is one earring, and like I said, the second earring is going to go together exactly the same as the first. I'm sorry, that's the back actually. That's the front. Sorry I wasn't able to finish both of them for you on stream today, but second verse, same as the first. You can always rewind the tutorial to the beginning to do your second earring. So thank you all so much for hanging out with us on the Beading Dreams live stream this Thursday lunchtime tutorial to make one of our 2 infinity earrings. I'm Allison from Beading Dreams in Dallas, Texas. We are an actual brick and mortar retail bead store. We're here on Lovers Lane, and we are open for business Monday through Saturday from 1 to 6. If you're not local in Dallas, you can find us on this, thanks Lori, on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream, 5 times a week with complimentary tutorials. We do stream Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at 6 p.m. Central Time, plus Thursdays at noon, and live merchandise sales every Wednesday and every Saturday at 7:30. Today is Torch Thursday. That means we will be back at 6 p.m. tonight with our one-word ring. That is a combination stamping and soldering tutorial, and you know me with the torch, there's always a chance I'm going to set something on fire. So hopefully everyone has a fantastic rest of your Thursday, and we will see y'all back on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream, tonight at 6.
널 처음 만났었고 우린 낯설었고 언제 그랬냐는 듯 껴안은 채 아프단 말도 없이 난 처음이란 말로 어디로 가는지도 몰랐어. 널 처음 만났었고 우린 낯설었고 언제 그랬냐는 듯 껴안은 채 괜찮단 말도 없이 난 어떻게든 될 거라고 난 그냥
This is me losing to the rapids. Take it back, moving ever faster. Check front, no, never going backwards. I peep whatever is disastrous. We fight, we talk and make it up. You jump in ship when it gets rough. I can't ever just be enough for you. Matter of fact, I can't even afford you. I saw the way you look at him. I seen your eyes trying to hide your thought. Wanted to get with the truth and your lies were afoot, keeping me down no matter how I fought. I noticed that the us and trust was you and I and my suicide. Never going back, never check the past. Sorries never matter, promises don't last. I know that the fire burning wasn't wrong, but a perfect match. We were too good for each other so much that we burned too fast. Left in ash, iodine diet. You made me salty just for fun. And throughout explanations of my expectations, you could never learn to love. We can't go from whence we came. I know that you won't try that hard. I'm wounded by my battle scars.
널 처음 만났었고 우린 낯설었고 언제 그랬냐는 듯 껴안은 채 아프단 말도 없이 난 처음이란 말로 어디로 가는지도 몰랐어. 널 처음 만났었고 우린 낯설었고 언제 그랬냐는 듯 껴안은 채 괜찮단 말도 없이 난 어떻게든 될 거라고 난 그냥 믿었지.
I think I might have spent my whole damn life in love with somebody, but hopelessly you don't miss me on the way back round to the house party. Made me stop at the store, got whiskey galore, and I drank that shit till my eyes can't see. Broke down ice machine, it was meant to be cold, but I drink enough, it feels warm to bleed. You were warning me about bad decisions, but you made it worse in this bad religion like Scientology. I ain't gotta be mixing up, but it's bad addiction. Treat popping pills like a competition when you popping off about how you miss on my Adderall up. Some bad addition, my window stuck on an older dish. We've been staring at the same shit, but it don't look right to me. You cut my image out of your group photo, frame me for it and blasted me, but I still feel like I can't ignore it. Flag waving my face so casually, don't want another casualty. And actually I'm so proud to see that we came far enough from our hometown. See it for ourselves that it's going down. I look on your phone, I've been calling just to lay around. You don't wanna talk, so I think I gotta say it now. I'm crazy for you.
널 처음 만났었고 우린 낯설었고 언제 그랬냐는 듯 껴안은 채 아프단 말도 없이 난 처음이란 말로 어디로 가는지도 몰랐어. 숨이 헐떡거리는 너는 다가오고 멈춰지지 않아. 참 곤란했었지. 괜찮단 말도 없이 난 어떻게든 될 거라고 난 그냥 믿었지.
Are you a gamer? Then game like a gagillionaire. A gagillionaire games at the highest level with AT&T Fiber with hyper gig speeds. The speed, exhilarating. The power, intoxicating. The under 18 millisecond ping rate, zombie annihilating. Live like a gagillionaire. Get AT&T Fiber. Internet that upgrades everything. Now with hyper gig speeds.
Limited availability in select areas. Visit att.com/hypergig for details. Speeds vary, not guaranteed. Other factors may impact on game lag.
Hey, it's Spotify. Here's something new for pop fans. Shiloh Dynasty, the latest release. You're my favorite topic. Tap the banner to check it out.